guys doing today? I hope you're doing well. We're going on a great adventure today, but I just happened to pull in here to the cemetery where my dad, my grandparents, and great-grandparents are married. And I just watched these men pour dirt in a grave. And it just hit me. It made me cry. I think, wow, how final. And that's it. You see him walking on it, see him digging. They just took that dump truck and just poured dirt. Obviously, they just had a funeral. And that's what they're doing. Just always amazes me here. It's a beautiful cemetery. Just the steps and stages that come along with a burial and a death. You think, oh gosh, Amy, how morbid. But you know, it's not a sad thing. My dad is buried here in the mausoleum. We'll go up and take a look at that. But it's a good thing because we know we're going to see him again. Dad and I prayed the prayer of salvation together before he died. He was very sick, had Parkinson's disease, and it was not a fun disease. He was sick for quite a while, did really well with it, but then at the end, inevitably we know what's going to happen. But I will see him again because he accepted the Lord Jesus as his Savior. So it's a good thing. Today we are going to head to the Country Music Highway. It begins in Greenham, Kentucky and follows US 23 south. Our first stop today is going to be Webb's grocery store and the original Butcher Holler. If you saw the 1980 movie Coal Miner's Daughter, the movie talked all about Loretta's hometown, her cabin. This is the original cabin that she lived in with the furnishings of her parents, and it's just so interesting. The 1980 film was one of the highest grossing films of that year. Sissy Spacek won the Academy Award for Best Actress that year. It was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, and it won 2 Golden Globes, Best Picture and Best Actress. And it's deemed significant by the Library of Congress and preserved by the U.S. National Film Registry. But Loretta Lynn is just a country music icon. She was born in April 14th, 1932, and her career spans 6 decades. She was nominated for 18 Grammys and won 3. She's the most awarded female country music artist and the only female ACM Artist of the Decade. She had 24 #1 hits and 11 #1 albums and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So I hope you'll come along. It is so interesting to see the original cabin that she grew up in, and found out that she was there 4 years ago in 2018 to visit her brother's during his funeral, Herman Webb. And you will see Webb's grocery store. That's going to be our first stop. Herman owned that store, and it's 2 miles before the cabin. And it's pretty rural. If you're going to go there, it's $5 at the door. I will put a link, but it is so worth it if you guys are near Paintsville, Kentucky. It's in a little teeny town called Van Lear. You need to go. It was incredible. If you like Loretta Lynn, if you like nostalgia, if you like antiques, and there were people there from all over the country visiting still today. So I hope you'll come along with me. Okay, we made it to Webb's grocery store. Herman Webb, her brother, owned it since 1976. You hear the roosters? Listen, hold on. They'll do it again. Of course, when we want them to, they won't. And Loretta's house is right up this road. Hear them? And the GPS doesn't work here, so hopefully we'll find our way back. It's way out here, y'all. There's this old store.
It's made out of coal, but what they do is they take that coal and they bust it up and they put it into a mold.
Oh, there's a lot of pictures of her on the back wall.
It's in with some resin.
There's one of her dresses.
And that's how they make it.
Now, how far is her house up the road? About 2 miles?
A mile and 6/10 exactly.
Not too bad, huh? And the GPS doesn't work out here, does it?
Not really, no.
You just have to stop and ask people how to find your way back.
Well, it's simple to get back out here. You just follow the road.
Are you guys going to go up to the house? That's where we're going to head next.
I'm just worried about getting back.
Oh,
You can't get lost here now.
You can't?
No, there ain't no way.
Okay. Just keep going back the way we came.
Same old drag, that's it.
Okay, guys, we made it. This is it. Butcher Holler. This is her home place. There's quite a few people here. Let's see. Kentucky, Tennessee. There's the house right there. You have to wait your turn to go in. So there's a group in there now. So all the folks waiting on the porch, we're just waiting to go in. Look at this. That's something. Okay, we're going to have to wait till the next group. They are actually giving tours, and it's Herman's, Loretta's brother's daughter, who's going to give us this tour today.
My dad's name was Herman.
Okay.
So I was supposed to have been a Herman Jr. And he didn't let me forget it. Well, my dad was Loretta's brother. So that makes me a niece. And I tell everybody, I said, I do talk about my dad in this tour, so just get used to it. Well, my dad, he deserves some credit here because this house would not be standing, literally standing today if it weren't for my dad. This house was originally built like in 1900, 1899, somewhere around there, by a man. His name was John Red Butcher. He was Loretta and my dad's uncle. My grandparents moved in this house around 1934. They bought it some years later, but they moved into it in 34. They lived here a little over 20 years. They left here in the mid-50s and moved to Wabash, Indiana. That's where I was born and raised.
Okay.
But you know what? They never, ever sold this house. And I said, I really feel in my heart that my grandma always planned on coming back someday. You know, that's why they didn't sell it. The movie came out in 1980. Well, this house in 1980 had no renovations. It was very close to what she described in her song. Nobody lives there anymore. Nothing left but the floors. It wasn't that bad, but not far from it. The porch was about to fall off from it. It still had just a stacked rock foundation underneath it. So it's very unstable. But after the movie came out, people just started flooding here to see this house. It wasn't being monitored. I said, we ended up losing boards off the end of the house. People wanted souvenirs. Yeah. But my dad did do the renovations the way you see it here today. The big posts for the supports under the house. My dad did that. He replaced this front porch. And actually, there's a picture on the wall in this bedroom here, right about there, of this house when he was doing the renovations. It has no front porch on it.
Okay.
But he went to great lengths to put everything back as close to original. These floorboards, this is yellow poplar wood. The floorboards of the original porch was yellow poplar. Bugs don't like yellow poplar. That's why they used it. The wood overhead here actually is original wood that he was able to salvage, and he reused it overhead here. So I always give my dad a hand. And you can join in with me if you like, because literally, I said this house wouldn't be standing if it weren't for him. So come on in. But there were people who lived in this.
These are just pictures of her. We're waiting on her to come in and talk to us. There's Loretta and her husband. That's her in Conway, Whitty.
Now, have you all seen the movie? I do make references to the movie. I bet you young boys haven't, have you? Maybe this will make you want to see it. There's a scene in the movie when Doolittle was trying to ask for Loretta's hand in marriage. Well, my grandparents had him running back and forth because they didn't want to give him permission to marry her. She was too young, and Doolittle was too wild. I said, I don't think they liked him much. Loretta finally stops him, and she says, "Oh, do just sit down here and wait till they go to bed. That's the only time you're going to catch them together." Right here's their bed. This is their bedroom, so this is where he had to come catch them together. My dad actually told me this bedroom furniture right here has never left this house.
Wow.
It's been here all these years. I said, the only reason I can think that my grandma didn't take her to Indiana when they moved to Indiana is she was taking care of her boys. Example, my dad, he was working in Indiana, but he was still dating my mom down here. So he was making a lot of trips back and forth. The same with my Uncle Junior. I said, she was making sure her boys had a place to stay. Mamas do that, don't they? Now, I'll tell you all, my grandparents had 8 kids, but they did not keep a swing in their bedroom. That is the swing, though, that they used on the front porch. Now, the reason it's still in one piece, when they left here in the mid-50s, it was stuck upstairs in the closet. Yeah. Now, the thing that blows my mind is it stayed upstairs in that closet till about 16 years ago. Yeah. Somebody brought my dad this picture right here. And that's my grandma and grandpa sitting on the swing. So Dad thought, well, maybe people'd like to see it. You know.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I said, but the truth be told, my dad was surprised it was still there. Because when he told me about it, he said, you know, it was sitting on its end in the corner of the closet right where I left it. 50 some years before. You know. I said, it really, when we go through the house, you will see how much of this stuff is original. And it just blows my mind because I said, nobody knew what Loretta was going to do with her life, you know. But, you know, wait, God knew. Yes. He knew what she was going to do. So he helped guide Dad to bring this stuff together. I'm sure of it. You see this old radio right here?
Oh, yeah.
If the kids are in the group, I'll say, do you know what that is? That is the radio that they used to listen to the Opry on. Now, it's originally battery operated. And we're not talking about AA or C-cell batteries. It was like a car battery. And they were expensive. And Dad said his dad would only let them play it once a week. But he said when they did, he said everybody in the holler would gather to come listen. But you got to remember, they were growing up here in the 30s and 40s, wartime. So they listened a lot to the news before they listened to the Grand Ole Opry to catch up with what was going on with the war. You see that old guitar there? I always point it out because that right there is probably the first guitar Loretta ever played on. Yeah. Please note I said played on and not played. I'm sure she learned some chords and stuff on it. That guitar actually belonged to their Uncle Carmen.
Is that whose picture there?
That's his picture right there. He was my grandpa's brother, okay? He lived in a house that sat out here above where the horse barn is now. That was their grandparents' home place to kind of give you a proximity of where the grandparents lived. And I questioned my dad because I don't want to fib to anybody about what I tell up here. You know, I said, how can I say Loretta played on this guitar? You know, my dad looked at me and he says, well, I can. He said, Uncle Carmen let all us kids play on it. And I look at the neck of it, though. I said, you can tell it's had a lot of music. This is Loretta's grandparents and great-grandparents. This is her grandfather, Alex Webb. Her grandmother, Amanda Butcher Webb. We're in Butcher Holler. So that's where the Butchers come into our family tree. This is Alex's parents down here. His daddy's name was William Bid Webb. His mother was Isabel Music Webb. But look at her. I said, you can tell she had a lot of Cherokee Indian in her. This was Amanda's parents over here. Her daddy's name was Simon Butcher. Now, they all lived here in Butcher Holler. Dad said he traced the first Webb to come in here to live back to about 1885. Now, I've done some reading. The Butchers came here in the 1840s. Yeah. Now, like I said, I do like to point out everything that's original. Both of these kitchen cabinets in here, and I know some of you might want to hang back to take pictures. Both of these kitchen cabinets were my grandma's. Okay? There's a butter churn that sits in the floor over here. My grandma made her butter with that churn. And these 2 iron tubs over here, my dad told me Grandma made her lye soap in those tubs. You know. And the cook stove here, it was Grandma's. Now, Dad did tell me it wasn't her first one, but she did use it while they lived here. But I want you all to take note. I don't know if you know what this tub is here.
It's a steal, isn't it?
I want you to know something. It did not belong to my grandpa. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. That's the thumping cake part of a moonshine still. It gives a good segue, though, to the picture that's sitting there in front of it. If you remember in the movie, there was a moonshiner. His name was Lee Dollarhide. And he tried to get Doolittle to help him sell his moonshine, right? But Lee gets killed. Well, the man with the hat on his head here, that's Lee Dollarhide. And Dad told me the way they depicted that in the movie is exactly the way he remembered it happening. Because he said when Lee came up missing, they sent a search party out. Doolittle was in that search party. And when they brought his body out of the hills, it was draped over a mule. He brought it right by this front porch here. Now, my dad had such a vivid memory of it because it was the first time as a young boy he ever saw a dead body, you know. But there was more to it than that. Lee was their cousin, so it was more personal to him, you know. I thought it was kind of interesting because you know how two people can have a memory of something? Well, Dad's memory of it was exactly the same as Loretta's, because Loretta's was what was shown in the movie, you know. I like to talk about it because I want you all to know he was real. What happened to him was real. It wasn't made up for the movie to spice it up. You know, that movie didn't need spicing up. There was a line though that his characters remembered for saying when he was talking to Do. He said, "Do, it's either coal mining, moonshining, or moving on down the line." And Doolittle decided to move it on down the line. Yeah, and we'll move it on into the dining room here.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. You can go over here if you like. Is anybody getting hot or anything yet?
I'm fine.
Okay. Because I do turn the fans on when it gets a little warmer.
It's a lot cooler.
These were the
It is
tubs.
nicer.
These are the tubs for the soap.
Yeah, those iron tubs. Dad said Grandma would build a fire outside and set those tubs on it. And when I talk about it, I said they'd render their lard and put ash or whatever. I said, doesn't sound like you could get clean with that, does it?
It don't, but I guess you can.
Yeah. This was the dining room. The only furniture that would have been in here would have been a table and maybe a sideboard cabinet. This is my grandma's dining room table, believe it or not. Now, it's missing a couple of leaves. It would have filled this whole room, you know. The first time I saw this table, look at the feet.
The eagle claw legs. Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
I said,
Look at them.
that's a nice table.
It is.
I questioned my dad about that. I said, I thought Grandma and Grandpa were poor.
Right.
My dad explained it to me though. They bought it secondhand. So it was old when they got it. It had a matching hutch, but the hutch was too tall to fit in here. But my grandpa didn't let it go completely to waste. When you go into the front room, the mirror over the fireplace and that mantle over the fireplace are from that hutch.
Wow.
I just think that's kind of cool.
It is. Well,
I always point out this saddle over here. That's an old cavalry saddle. They call them a McClellan. And the reason I point it out is it originally belonged to Doolittle, Loretta's husband. Yeah. You remember in the movie when Grandpa gave Do permission to marry Loretta, my grandpa says, promise me 2 things. Anybody tell me what those 2 things were? Don't ever hit her.
Yep.
Don't mistreat her. Don't hit her. And don't take her out of the mountains. And he breaks both those promises. And he doesn't just take her out of the mountains. He takes her all the way to the state of Washington to live. Yeah. And she stayed here with the family while he went out to set things up. And if you remember, she was pregnant with her first child. But just before he left to go set things up, he gave the family here a horse with that saddle and 2 coon dogs. All I can say is, my dad, he liked the trade. His sister 4 horse with a saddle and 2 coon dogs. He's a little younger than Loretta, okay? Everybody back then had beds in their front room.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to no electricity. Dad said people just didn't gather in the house. They just didn't do it. He said they more or less used this room as a guest bedroom. This furniture is original. This sewing machine right here, it was my grandma's. She sewed many a feed sack into a dress for Loretta on that sewing machine. And my grandma actually told my sister that she made a point of going to town with Grandpa when he went to buy his feed, so she could pick out the prettiest sacks. You see the record player there on top? That's an old Victrola, it cranks. That belonged to Grandpa Ramey. And every time he'd come to visit, he'd bring it and sit it in the middle of the floor here and put a record on it. And Dad said all the kids would be dancing and singing. This door right here, you probably remember that in the movie when she shooed my dad upstairs. That goes upstairs. There's 2 attic-style bedrooms upstairs. That's where the kids slept. Boys would sleep in one room, girls would sleep in the other until it got really cold in the wintertime. And then you'd see 3 and 4 beds in each one of these rooms right here. Because right there's your source of heat. And that is a coal burning fireplace. You know, and I was doing this tour one day and it hit me, you know. Did you all realize Loretta was the only girl for the first 5 of the children? Yeah, my Uncle Junior was the oldest, then Loretta, then my dad Herman, then my Uncle J. Lee, and then my Uncle Don. I said, it's all making sense to me now. No wonder she was Daddy's girl. You know, no wonder she was so feisty and spunky and could stand up to do like she did, because she grew up fighting 4 brothers.
Yeah.
It's all making sense, you know. Yeah.
When did Crystal come into the picture?
I'll tell you here in a second. So I used to say, Loretta had her own room upstairs here. But you know what? I learned differently because they didn't film the movie here. Somebody was asking me about that earlier. They filmed the movie in Letcher County, Kentucky. And they built a replica of this house. And Loretta do actually have that building, the replica, set up at her ranch. So you can tour that house down there. And I had somebody come here right after they toured that house. And they quickly corrected me when I said Loretta had her own room. Apparently my grandparents kept an extra little single-size bed in their room. And they tell down there that that's where Loretta slept, because she would help Grandma with the babies. And I believe that wholeheartedly. It makes sense, doesn't it? Yes. Things have to make sense to me. And I said, I knew Grandma wouldn't stick her upstairs with 4 brothers. That's a scary thought to me.
Yeah.
Talking about babies, I point out this picture right here.
Oh.
This is my grandma. That's my grandpa. That right there is Crystal Gayle. You see the bush that they're standing in front of? That's a holly bush. That's this holly tree that you could sit under here next to the house now.
Really?
I do it that way because people don't associate Crystal with Butcher Holler, but this is her home place too.
Yep.
She was the youngest of the 8, okay? She was the only one born in a hospital over here in Paintsville, Kentucky. She would have been about 4 or 5 years old when they left here and moved to Indiana, so she has memories of growing up here.
You can see the difference in her and Loretta's personality.
Well, I said, you think about it. Loretta grew up with brothers, literally. When she left here, she was about, 15 years old? And if you remember in the movie, there was a little toddler girl. That was my Aunt Peggy Sue. And there was a baby. That was my Aunt Betty. She left here at that time. She did not grow up with sisters.
Right.
She grew up with brothers. Well, Crystal grew up with Peggy, Betty, and herself. So she grew up with sisters. And in Indiana. And my grandpa died when Crystal was about 9 years old. And it was very traumatic for her. She loved her daddy, you know. So I'm thinking, you know, you think about things like that. Crystal grew up with sisters, being guarded by sisters. Loretta had to fight brothers, you know, so they were very different, you know, but it's understandable. This is her home place too. And I'm going to tell you all something. You see that poster there? She's not much taller than that poster is in real life. And she's just as beautiful. And I tell everybody she's just as beautiful on the inside because she's a sweetheart of a person. And she's doing a show here in Paintsville on September 30th, if y'all can come back.
Wow.
You know, because I said this is her hometown.
Wow.
So I would love for her to have a good turnout, you know. And I said, you think about it, you know. She's there's 19 years difference between her and Loretta. Well, Loretta's 90.
Jeez.
So you can figure out how old Crystal is.
Don't sound like it.
Yeah.
How's Loretta doing now?
She's doing well. She's doing well, the last I've heard.
Now, she's not living at the house in Hurricane Mills, is she?
She does.
Does she?
She doesn't live in the mansion. When Doolittle got sick, they actually built a house behind that mansion,
Okay.
a one-level house.
I've been down
And
there
they
too.
moved
It's
into
a
that.
Beautiful place down
Yeah,
there.
it is. It is. So she lives in that house behind the mansion. This was a coal camp community, but you all realize this house wasn't a coal camp home. I said, that's the only way I can explain to people how my grandparents were able to survive here so long after the mine shut down. Because they were here like 6, 7 years after the mine shut down.
Are any of the coal camp houses still standing?
Oh, yeah.
Where's that?
When you go out of the Holler, out of the, down Van Leer, any of the little houses that are built real close to by each other with porches, those are all camp homes.
Okay.
They look the same.
Yeah, they look very similar. And there's actually a road down there when you go out called Silk Stocking Loop.
Yeah.
You saw that? Well, if you went down that road, all those houses were big houses. Well, that's where the coal mine foremans lived.
Okay.
That's the reason they called it Silk Stocking Loop. Because they were the only ones that could afford to buy their own silk stockings. Anyway, the grounds here look completely different. Tell me if I've already said some of this, because I do this so many times I forget, you know. I said the first time I saw the movie, I told my dad, I said, that doesn't look like Butcher Holler. Where are all the trees? You know. Well, my dad explained it to me. He said, well, back then people worked the land. Any flat spot would have had a garden. And the coal company, when a tree got to be about that big around, the coal company cut it down because they used them as props in the mines. So all these hillsides would have been cleared off. It would have looked more like what they represented in the movie than what it looks like here today, you know.
Because they were using all that lumber for other
Yeah,
things.
yeah. Sign the book before you go out.
Well, we're headed back down the Country Music Highway, 23 north now rather than 23 south, back to Ashland, back to Huntington. But I really enjoyed my time at Loretta Lynn's house. I was surprised that it was original, that one of her family gave the tour, which is really special. Sweet lady. So I hope you had a great time. I did. And God loves you. God bless you. Until I see you again. Bye.